Hi, everyone. Welcome to this week's Let's Talk. This week, I am talking to Pedro Navejas Rodriguez, who is one of my dear friends that I've known for quite some time now, and he's an educator. Is definitely one of the people that I look to when I am looking to find new people to listen to or read. Pedro is definitely very involved in social justice and in talking about race and identity and sexual identity. And I'm excited to have him here tonight. So, Pedro, welcome, and tell everyone a little bit about yourself.
Hi, yeah, super excited. Thank you for bringing me in and asking me to talk. So I'm Pedro Navejas Rodriguez. Let me see my little speech. What is it? I was born and raised in Jalisco, Mexico. I've moved to the Central Valley in California when I was 8 with my family, like under a visitor visa. And then I was an undocumented college student at UC Berkeley until I was able to attain my permanent residency while in college. So it definitely let me see a lot of the struggles, but also like this new world um, of the privilege that it is to be documented. And then I joined TFA South Central Washington region to teach middle school ELA. And I thought I was gonna do it for 2 years. I was like, oh, this will be my little gap, my little chance to then apply to law school. But this is now my 8th year teaching. I am back in the Central Valley, and with goals of being a principal someday.
Yes, 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 yes. Oh, um, I had forgotten. I mean, not really forgotten, but it's always a great reminder to think about how you were a charter corps member and helped launch the Eastern Washington expansion and all the good you did out there in Grandview. Yes, so Pedro and I have been educators. We have we both worked for Teach for America when he was a corps member, and then he came to Wonderful College Prep Academy, where I worked a couple of years ago. And we're so glad to have him back in Central Valley. Pedro, maybe you can talk to me a little bit about how you got involved in conversations about social justice, or when that started becoming something that you noticed you were passionate about.
Well, I think like social justice isn't a thing that you know how to name growing up. It's just something you notice. Um, and I definitely think like my view as an immigrant, like 8 years old, I entered the US was something like my family dreamt for a long time. But I always kind of like felt like an outsider looking in, but also
Mm.
understanding that I had an education of things. So like a vivid memory, like in 5th grade or 4th grade that I had is like walking like at my school, like lunch, and there's a board with like drawings of like Thanksgiving. And not really knowing what Thanksgiving is, but then like noticing happy
Mm.
pilgrim faces and Native American faces, and me being like, that doesn't make sense with what I know about the winners and losers of like history, right? The way
Yeah.
things are told. So I was just like, I was like, okay, that's. But I never thought to be like speaking out against it because I was like, I'm an outsider. I'm just like observing things. And definitely through college, coming from a really small rural town, Joaquina, California. It's 150 people. Then going to UC Berkeley and being in a big town, not town, it's a city, right? Like I remember feeling like this other sense of big change, and then being away from my community um, really helped me like propel myself to find like who am I really, what are my cultural roots, and then college, my friends in college, my classes in college really helped me put words like the words to what I was experiencing, right? Like race, structural racism, how it appears in media. And then everything was just sent into hyperdrive when I joined TFA, and then being an educator and then seeing things from the other side, and how as an educator what I was doing informed my classroom and my colleagues. So then social justice was just the thing that I knew was driving me. And then when I was an educator, definitely was the driving force between like what I do in my classroom all the time or what I try to bring. I'm very aware of like the region where I teach. I'm purposeful that I want to teach in rural community. I'm purposeful that I want to be in a primarily Latinx community with migrant students because I was a migrant student when I was growing up too, and making sure that students have opportunities because like luckily school is like a thing that I was good at. But then if I have that thing, and then was in migrant program, I was in the Avid program, all these other systems that helped me, like be where I needed to go. Like I didn't even need a lot of guidance. I just needed someone to open the door for me and let me know. And I want to provide that for other students, other people in my community too. So that's where it all stemmed from. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Thank you for sharing a little bit about your journey. Um, you're an educator, as you've said, and right now is a crazy time for everyone, but especially for educators. What would you want folks to know right now about the reality of being a teacher, and what it is that you need from the broader community as well as a teacher?
I think as a teacher, I feel like one, I just need time and space to like reflect and think about all the changes that are happening really fast. Like for me, I am very driven through relationships and like the energy of a building. So like my students, like one huge thing that I try to tell myself every year is like I'm gonna learn all my students' names by the second day, right? Like I put a lot of effort into that. And now it's like I'm on week 2 and I still don't know them. Like all like I know names, I just don't know the face that goes with it or things. So I'm like, whew, this is very different. And then there's like a sense of rushing, right? Like of catching up at times. But I think like I wish it was a little more time to slow down a bit to really think what do we want at the end of it, and then like working towards that, making sure that everyone has what they need. And meeting the academic demands, of course, but like through that, still, how do we develop those relationships even online?
Yeah. And also, how do we make sure, definitely about relationships, but then like, how do you build the trust to like really know what kids need, right? Because you're over a computer screen, um, which, hopefully some solutions are found out soon so
Yeah,
that our world can start up again. Um, when did you, so this goes back earlier to the idea of social justice, and you talked about like the activism lens, but I'm curious about when you started thinking about race and also inequity around race, because I know that when you were talking about that story about Thanksgiving, you sort of almost had an intuitive sense already as like a very young child. So what else helped you to develop that lens?
I think when I was in school, it was all driven towards college, and that was the message I got. Like, go to college, go to college. I did all the right things that I needed to do to get to college. I got to college. I felt like, wow, that was the end of this race. No one really informed me what happened afterwards. Like I'm at this like really prestigious school. I really had to deal with a lot of different issues. So like being undocumented, the people like at the financial office didn't know what kind of form I needed to fill out. I had to wait in calls. And then my parents doing a bunch of different things to ensure I was there and didn't feel like the financial burden of it. Those were big light bulbs to me when I was in college. And then definitely feeling like I was really far away from not just my family, but like my culture, and then being like, how do I look for it? And
Mm,
then I was part of different organizations in college that dealt with like youth, primarily like youth of color. So working, and then being part of a Latino fraternity really helped out because we discussed a lot about what it meant for our culture to be there. We discussed what it meant to be men. We discussed what it means to be queer men. So all these things that were happening, like me on my own, and really propelled me to start thinking more about social justice.
mhm.
And then it wasn't until, and like I think growing up Latino, it's just like races everywhere, kind of like you just don't know that's what you're talking about. But it wasn't until I was an actual teacher and going through different like sessions and I had this weird thing when I went to TFA that I was like, now I'm gonna know what white people are like because I've never had white friends really and things like that, you know?
Yeah.
And then going through all the sessions, I was like, oh, that's what they go through. Okay. All right. Now let me focus on the community now because now we're being propelled into like a community that I'm not a part of and many people were not a part of. And like Grandview was so small, right? Like small and people don't know what to expect from going to a rural community, but I'm from it. So I'm like, I got my hobbies, I got things I can focus on. Other people didn't. So then it was like all these different moving parts and we were affecting a community. So it was like, okay, how does this affect the people of Grandview? Me becoming a person of Grandview and really connecting, then seeing how like race played in it, gender, sexuality, and particularly in like a rural town, like in a smaller town.
Hmm. Gotcha. Thank you for sharing. And I know, you said you had your hobbies, and that is one of the things we wanted to talk about today was books. And specifically, I know it's really important to you that not only are you reading from a diverse variety of perspectives, but also that you're exposing students to a variety of voices so that they can, help sort of shape their identity and see themselves reflected in that text. Tell me a little bit about who some of your favorite authors are, and maybe some of the folks that you recommend to share with kids.
Mhm. So I think when I think about like diverse books and literature, one big thing that I think about is like it seems like if you weren't exposed to something, you feel like, oh no, like where do I start? Or like, is there even those type of books? And I'm here to tell you there are. Like once you start like Google search for like Latino characters or like search like, POC characters in whatever genre, you're gonna find like so many books, so many authors, but it just takes you like that one effort, that intention and that purpose to find them and you will. Like they're out there. There's so many. And there's so many people that I've encountered that are like professors and people that mention things like, oh, there's books like that, or like during my time, I've never heard like I know years back, with my roommate Erin, she mentioned like talking to a professor and saying like, oh, we're doing the 52 YA queer book, like, challenge. And professors being like, oh, there's that many like queer books with that perspective and not knowing. And so first thing is go out there, go search, and that search will lead you to way more. I think one of the most exciting authors right now, like for me personally, is Elizabeth Acevedo. She writes primarily YA and poetry books, and um, but with really fresh and authentic voices. So I would be on the lookout for her, just because, and like one of her books, With the Fire on High, is the next one of my book clubs. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
So lots of books, students devour them too, and she knows exactly how to paint a vivid picture and multiple perspectives in a way that's authentic and not like tokenized correctly. I mean, other classic authors is like Octavia E. Butler, who's a sci-fi master. Love her. You should consume her in all forms. Um, Benjamin Alire Science is one, and he does like Latinx perspectives. So like one of my all-time favorite books is Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. And that's like a book I've had in my classrooms for, since the very first year. Um, Jason Reynolds, of course. April Daniels is another one. She writes the Dreadnought series, which is about a superhero dealing with new powers, responsibilities, and the chance to live freely as a trans person. So, like, people don't know that there's these books, and they're geared for kids. So, like, a lot of the books that I consume are like for like YA youth, young people, because I want to consume them so then I can put them in front of my students and I know exactly what I'm giving them.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I really admire that about you too, because you are um, one of the few people I know who like really enjoys reading and reading voraciously. which I think is a little underappreciated in today's society. I think especially with the accessibility of video and audio content, it can be harder to get people into like a visual medium. But yeah, and that's definitely good. A good thought to start with too is like, well, what's preventing you from researching what different authors out there? Like, whether it's queer authors that you're interested in getting to know more about. I read a book not that long ago. A Woman Is No Man, I think is the title of it. And that was about Iranian women in America. And that was a really interesting story for me to read. And I think one that I hadn't consciously like sought out different authors from Middle Eastern countries. And so that's something I've been trying to build into my practice a little bit more. But yeah, definitely the first step is Google, because
Or any way people get books, for instance, like I know that I'm signed up through my local library through like to get audiobooks. And then libraries sometimes have a limited, selection. So I'm just there browsing, and then something that's available, I'll start listening to it. And I'm just like, I did not know that this existed. I didn't know this kind of book was something that was out there. And it's just even through that simple connection of just being open for whatever. And then, the algorithms of Google and the internet will find the other things that you like. So
whether you want them to or not.
so, yeah.
And then also things like Goodreads, right? I think I'm a little suspicious of Goodreads sometimes because I think it takes some of my demographic data to recommend books about middle-aged women in divorce. Not that I'm middle-aged or divorced, for people who don't know me. That is just the stereotype age that I fit. But yeah, I think anything that you can do to engage in community around reading is definitely going to help you expand that perspective as well. Something that I didn't put in my questions, but that I'm also curious to hear your thoughts on. I know that you and Aaron, one of your friends that you mentioned, who also is a friend of mine, did National Novel Writing Month a few times with kids. Tell me a little bit about that and what that is, maybe for teachers who haven't heard of it before.
So NaNoWriMo is a program in which people any age can sign up, and it usually I think happens in November, which is they literally just want you to write, and they have many lessons and many workshops available for you to set a goal, and usually it's like around 50,000 words, and then they tell you you're gonna write every day, and then you're just trying to write. So I mean, Aaron was really the leader of that and leading kids, and in my new school, Megan Simpson's doing that too, where students and they're writing, and it's just free form. It's not you're not doing, but one big thing is that at the end they have this book, that they worked really hard for, and then no matter where you are, students will always show up for any opportunity they have to write stories. They're so creative, and they just need that outlet to do it and that motivation, and that's one that really stood out to me. Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for sharing. Who are some of the folks that you are learning from or that you have learned from over time that you would want to share with others to sort of follow and look into?
I think when you follow an author, that then they start connecting you to more, because I think the writing community really helps each other out. So I think if you're on Twitter, I'm not big on Twitter, but I just like half one where I'm just like following people, and I'm trying to think of which ones are the ones that are standing out the most to me. So I would have to look at my Twitter. Let me see, because they're usually way at the top. But I think, let me see. I know that I look also at publishers and different marketplaces. So like as an educator, I look at First Book Marketplace. So I don't know if you've heard of that, which
A
is,
little bit.
oh yeah. So it's this nationwide program that is for low SES communities and schools. So if you're at a low SES community or a school, then you can sign up for this program and you get books at a discounted rate. and these are all diverse and inclusive books. So you literally sign up, and a lot of the times you pay 80% off because they want, it's called first book because you're buying it for students so students can take home with them. And they're very representative of communities. That's usually where I look at to see what the new books are, because this is like one that exclusively focuses on like representing the communities in which they're trying to like send books for kids. Um, Seven Story Press is one that I follow. Um, and let me see, what's the last one? And Haymarket Books, which is part of Seven Story Press.
That's cool. What is something, because right now, as you know, 2020 is very hard. What is something that inspires you or that keeps you motivated as you're doing the impossible job of teaching from your house?
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely if for me it feels like reading sometimes, like you set a goal for yourself, but I've had like those reading moments where I'm not reading for a long time, just that I don't feel the energy. But I think like finding those books that I really enjoy, like I love comic books too. The Saga series is great. um One thing that I love, and like I'm watching more TV now, and I think finding really great TV that inspires and motivates is great. So like I'm really into this show called I May Destroy You on HBO. I don't know if you've heard of it, but if people have heard of it. RuPaul's Drag Race, I know. I feel like I'm like, oh wow, but you know, this is the year. And I think um, definitely finding that time to quit, like from work, really inspires me. So I think like having family time, I'm very lucky that I live with my brother. We have board game nights, so Catan is a thing that inspires me. So I don't know if that's what you meant, like that kind of inspiration, or like
No, no,
more.
no, 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 no. That's great. Just like having that downtime is super important. And I think is a good reminder. Because I think one of the unique challenges that I'm having in being at home is like it feels like all of the time has to be motivated towards like productivity, you
Hmm.
know? um, and so I'm like brewing kombucha and like making my sourdough. But it's, you know, it's good to hear, and I'm sure good for other folks, especially educators, to hear like take some time for yourself. It's okay to rest, feel recharged, and feel ready to go. Um, okay, cool. Well, those are all the questions that I had for you. Is there anything else you want to share with our viewing public out there?
Yeah, I think as an educator, like my main thing is to diversify books in my curriculum and in my classroom. And I've seen many teachers be able to do that. Like even if they're not ELA teachers, like math teachers have book bins in their like in their classroom just available for students. Science teachers do the same. And I think like as an ELA teacher, sometimes you feel like you can't bring in those kind of diverse voices or like queer voices into the curriculum. But I think if you feel strongly, like you've read it, you know, you will easily like be able to back it up and no one can tell you something. And I've had experiences like that can be uncomfortable chats where people don't really know that a book, you know, like they really, let me see, a book is called something that it isn't. So like, because a book had queer elements in it, it was like called awful things without that the person even reading it, and it was just out of fear. But for me, I was like, well, I've read it, and you're making these comments, and like teachers, you know, and then people advocating to remove a book from a classroom even.
Mm-hmm.
But it was kind of like, well, this is the fifth year this book is in my classroom. I've had kids read it multiple times. I don't know what you're talking about. And like having that frank conversation and being able to back up, right? Because I was able to call out, I think you're unfairly treating this book because you're saying it has an explicit like scene, you know, and it's like, but that's not what the book is about. And it's one line versus this greater thing that it's about. I think you may be addressing that. So if we
Mm-hmm.
are, then we can talk about that, but we can't judge something, right? And I think it's being able to defend it is going to be really important. And always question it. Like whoever's making decisions at your school about your books, question it. Like, why don't we have this other book?
Mm.
And it doesn't have to be attacking. It's just like I'm simply asking. and like I do have a resource. So like I always bring up with like I thought about this book could be more appropriate because of this. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but being ready for those conversations, and since you read them, it'll prepare you for that.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and definitely reading them first too, because I definitely can see myself just like going out and buying a bunch of books without having done some of the background research, which is super important.
But what I tell students and what I tell adults, like too, I teach seventh grade and eighth grade, and I'll say like this is a library. It has many like a range of topics. As you pick up a book, you need to decide with yourself, like your values, your family's values, and if a book is not for you or it doesn't go with what you're thinking or ready for yet, then you put it back. But I'm also not here to censor those things. I'm obviously not gonna put something way explicit like above middle school, but I'm not also gonna limit that because my classroom is full of different experiences. So a student might not be comfortable with something, but another student's living with that. So you can't tell
Yeah.
someone what they can or cannot. And I've had, you know, tough conversations with students, with parents. A parent has asked me, "Hey, why is my student like why is my student reading, you know, Love Simon?" And I was like, "Where's this coming
Mm-hmm.
from? Not where's this coming?" But I was like, "Well, it was part of a book, and I suggested it because many students like it." And like the parent wasn't like the parent was trying to be really understanding, and also the parent was worried. They were asking like, is there a reason why my child was chosen? Like they were feeling like if I thought this kid needed this book for a reason. And I was
Yeah.
like, no, no, there wasn't. It's just a good book.
Yeah.
It just also happens to have like a queer romance in it.
Yeah.
So kind of those things that ready to talk about it and also know that we're teaching a whole array of students and it's not one type. And that's why I find places that you trust. So like I know I trust First Book Marketplace because they really curate their books really well. So even if I haven't read it, I know that it's well like thought of for the population where it goes to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool.
So if you want any more stories about that or how to handle it, you can hit me up.
Yeah. So if people do have questions for you about maybe how to approach their administrators or things like that, where can they get at you on social media?
You know, Instagram. I'm very private actually, but you know, like if you DM or something, I don't know, like Instagram at Lambda2. You can email me to pnavejas1990 at gmail.com. Yeah,
There you go. Taking it back. Pedro, thank you so much for giving us some of your time and talking to us about ways that we can help students, be exposed to more voices, because that's super, super important. Um, and tune in next week, folks. Bye.
thanks.